welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be diving into Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Oh, yeah. I've heard a lot of good things about this one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Awesome.
If you're looking to improve your life by building better habits, you've come to the right place because we're going to break down all the key ideas and practical takeaways from this book.
Fantastic.
So you can start applying them right away to your own life.
Love that.
When I first picked up Atomic Habits, I was really struck by James Clear's personal story.
Yeah, he's got quite the story, doesn't he?
Yeah, and how he used these very habit principles to transform his own life, including, achieving some pretty remarkable things after a really serious setback.
Yeah, it's a powerful example of how even small changes can make a huge difference over time.
Right.
His story is definitely a great place to start, I think.
Okay, so let's dive in.
Let's do it.
The book opens with a pretty dramatic event in Clear's life. A near-fatal baseball injury he suffered in high school.
Right. I mean, we're talking serious stuff here.
Yeah.
Severe brain injury, facial fractures, even a coma.
Wow.
And then a really long and difficult recovery.
I can't even imagine, having to relearn basic functions and not knowing if you'll ever be able to play baseball again.
It's hard to fathom how you'd even begin to come back from something like that.
Yeah, but Clear was determined. He couldn't control the injury itself, but he could control his response to it.
Makes sense.
And that's where this obsession with habits began. He started focusing on making small improvements each day, those tiny little wins that could build up over time.
It's pretty remarkable that this experience, as difficult as it was, actually laid the foundation for his future success.
Right.
He went on to become a top athlete at Denison University, even setting records.
That's incredible. It really is a testament to the power of consistent effort, even when you're faced with massive challenges.
I mean, if Clear could achieve all that after a setback like that, it makes you wonder what's possible for anyone who really commits to building those good habits.
Right.
And that's really a key takeaway from the book. It's not about these overnight transformations, but rather consistently making small changes over time.
Clear illustrates this point perfectly with the example of the British cycling team.
Oh, yeah, that's a great example.
They went from being pretty mediocre to completely dominating the sport
Right.
by focusing on what they call the aggregation of marginal gains.
So instead of looking for one big solution, they focused on making tiny improvements to every single aspect of their training and performance.
Yeah, everything from the bikes they used to the riders' sleep habits. It's amazing how these seemingly insignificant changes individually could add up to create a massive advantage for the team.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a concept that really resonates with me, that 1% better or 1% worse each day compounds over time.
Yeah.
And can lead to huge differences in the long run.
Makes you think twice about all those seemingly small choices we make every single day, doesn't it?
It really does.
So this idea of focusing on the process rather than just the outcome leads us to one of Clear's most thought-provoking arguments: systems over goals.
Okay, interested.
He actually challenges this conventional wisdom that setting goals is the key to success.
That's interesting. I mean, so much of the self-help world is all about goal setting, right?
Exactly. And it's kind of a surprise to hear someone pushing back against that idea.
Right.
But Clear outlines 4 really compelling reasons why goals can actually be problematic. First, he points out that winners and losers often have the same goals.
I never thought of it that way.
So the goal itself isn't what guarantees success.
Makes sense.
It's more about the process you use to get there.
So it's not about the destination, but the journey.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the second reason?
The second point is that achieving a goal is really just a momentary change. It doesn't necessarily change the underlying system that produced that result.
Okay, I see. So you might hit a goal, but if you haven't changed your habits, you're likely to just slip back into old patterns.
Exactly. And the third reason is kind of interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
Clares argues that goals can actually limit our happiness by making it something that we only experience in the future. Like once we achieve the goal, rather than enjoying the process along the way.
So instead of constantly chasing the next milestone, we should be focusing on finding joy in the journey itself.
Precisely. And finally, the fourth reason is that goals can lead to what he calls yo-yo effects.
Oh, I know what you mean. You hit the goal and then you stop putting in the effort, only to end up back where you started.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
if goals aren't the answer, then what should we focus on?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, Clear's solution is to focus on the system, the process that leads to the outcome you desire.
So it's about falling in love with the daily practice, the consistent actions that create sustainable change.
It's a shift in mindset, for sure. Instead of obsessing over losing 20 pounds, You focus on becoming the type of person who makes healthy choices consistently.
Right. It's subtle, but it's a really important distinction.
And that brings us to this idea of identity-based habits, one of the most powerful concepts in the book.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets really interesting.
It's not just about doing the habit, it's about becoming the kind of person who does it naturally.
I love that distinction. It's
Yeah.
about aligning your actions with the person you want to be.
Exactly.
So how do we actually put this into practice? How do we make that shift happen?
Well, Clear lays out a two-step process.
Okay.
First, you got to decide the type of person you want to be.
So like really get clear on your values and the qualities you want to embody.
Exactly.
What kind of person do I want to become?
Right. And then step 2 is all about proving it to yourself with small wins.
So every time you act in alignment with that identity, you're casting a vote for that person you want to become.
Precisely. Each action is like a tiny step towards solidifying that new identity.
There's this great example in the book about Brian Clark, an entrepreneur who struggled with nail biting his whole life.
I've heard of him.
He finally managed to break the habit, not through willpower, but by getting a manicure.
A manicure. How did that work?
It might seem strange,
Mhm.
but it worked because it actually shifted his self-image. Getting a manicure made him feel like the type of person who doesn't bite their nails.
I see. So he started seeing himself differently and his behavior followed suit.
Exactly. It's a brilliant illustration of how a seemingly small action can have a big impact on our self-perception.
So the key takeaway here is your current habits are a reflection of your current identity.
If you want to change those habits, you need to start by changing the beliefs you hold about yourself.
It's a powerful reminder that lasting change starts from within.
Now that we've explored the foundation of atomic habits, let's move on to the practical framework that Clear provides for building those better habits. The 4 laws of behavior change.
All right, let's hear it.
So these 4 laws are really at the core of the book. They give you a clear roadmap for changing any habit. And what I found really cool was how Clear uses all these examples and research to show how these laws actually work in real life.
Yeah, he doesn't just state the laws,
Yeah.
He actually brings them to life.
Exactly.
Like take the first law, make it obvious. It's all about becoming aware of those cues that trigger our habits, right?
Mhm.
We often just go through life on autopilot, not even realizing what's prompting us to do the things we do.
It's like our brains are constantly scanning for cues and then predicting outcomes and creating these automatic responses without us even knowing it.
Totally. Like he tells this fascinating story about a paramedic who instinctively knew her father-in-law was having a heart attack just based on these subtle visual cues that she'd subconsciously picked up over time. It's crazy, right?
That's amazing. It really highlights how our brains are always learning and making these associations, even when we're not consciously aware of it.
Exactly. So
Right.
how do we make those cues for good habits more obvious?
Right.
Well, Clear suggests a few practical tactics. One is called implementation intentions, where you plan when and where you're going to do the habit. So instead of vaguely saying, I'll exercise more, you'd be specific, like, I'll go for a 20-minute walk every morning at 7 a.m. in my neighborhood.
That makes so much sense. It removes all that decision-making and makes it harder to come up with excuses.
Exactly. You're committed, time and place are set. Another tactic he talks about is habit stacking. This is where you attach a new habit to an existing one. For instance, after I brush my teeth, I will meditate for 5 minutes.
I love that idea. By linking it to something you already do regularly, you're kind of piggybacking on that existing routine.
Exactly. And then there's design your environment. It's all about optimizing your surroundings to make good habits easier and bad habits less appealing.
So like putting healthy snacks front and center in your kitchen and hiding the junk food, right?
Exactly. Make those good choices the easy choices.
Makes sense. Okay, so make it obvious is about the cues. Now the second law, make it attractive. This one seems to tap into our brain's reward system.
This is where it gets really interesting. Clear digs into the concept of supernormal stimuli, things that are like exaggerated versions of normal stimuli, and they basically hijack our brains. He uses this example about Nico Tinbergen's experiment with herring gulls.
Herring gulls. What do birds have to do with habits?
So Tinbergen found that by exaggerating a stimulus, in this case, by putting a red dot on a fake bird's beak, he could make the chicks peck at it way more frantically than at the actual mother bird. He called those exaggerated versions super normal stimuli.
Oh, I get it. So it's like the chicks were more drawn to this intense, exaggerated version, even if it wasn't the natural or best option.
Exactly. And get this, the same thing happens with humans. Think about junk food, social media notifications, video games. They're all designed to be super attractive, triggering those reward pathways, making them hard to resist.
No wonder it's so easy to get sucked in, even when you know it's not good for you.
Right. So the challenge is to make our desired habits just as alluring as those temptations. And one way to do that is with what Clear calls temptation bundling. He talks about this guy, Ronan Byrne, who basically hacked his stationary bike to only let him watch Netflix if he was pedaling at a certain speed. Pretty clever, huh?
That's amazing. He basically turned exercise into a reward for watching Netflix. I love it.
It's like tricking your brain into wanting the healthy habit. Another great strategy is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the norm. Think about runners joining running clubs or people trying to quit smoking and going to support groups.
Makes sense. We're all influenced by the people around us, so surrounding yourself with people who have the same values and habits can be huge.
Totally. Find your tribe. Now, the third law, make it easy. Seems pretty self-explanatory at first, but Clear, he really digs deep into the psychology of it.
Okay, so what's the secret?
It's all about reducing friction, making good habits so easy to do that you can't not do them, even when motivation is low. He gives a great example from this photography class taught by Jerry Olsman.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Olsman divided his students into two groups. One graded on the quantity of photos they took, and the other graded on the quality of a single photo. And guess what? The best work came from the quantity group.
It's kind of counterintuitive, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Right. The quantity group, they were all about taking action, getting those reps in, while the quality group, they got stuck in perfectionism, overthinking.
So it's better to just get started, even if it's not perfect.
Right. Exactly. Action over perfection. Another key idea here is the 2-minute rule. Any new habit should be able to be started in 2 minutes or less.
That's so helpful because it makes starting feel way less overwhelming.
Totally. Instead of trying to run a marathon, just focus on putting on your running shoes. And once you've taken that first step, it's much easier to keep going. Clear also talks about priming the environment, setting yourself up for success in advance, like laying out your workout clothes the night before or having all your healthy ingredients prepped and ready to go.
It's all about removing obstacles.
Right. And then, of course, there's automation, using technology to make good habits automatic or to make bad habits more difficult. Think automatic bill pay or website blockers to limit distractions.
Awesome. Okay, so now on to the final law, make it satisfying. This is about making those good habits stick by tapping into our brain's reward system.
This is a big one. Because let's face it, our brains are wired for instant gratification. We want that reward now.
That explains why it's so hard to resist that extra dessert or to hit that snooze button one more time.
It's all about the short-term rewards winning out, even when we know we should be focusing on the long-term benefits.
It's a constant battle.
Clear actually calls it the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. So we have to find ways to make those good habits feel good in the moment.
Okay, I'm listening. What are some strategies for that?
One of the simplest is just reinforcement. It doesn't have to be a huge reward. Even something small can make a difference. Enjoying a cup of tea after a productive work session, or putting $1 in a jar every time you go to the gym.
So it's just about creating that positive association.
Exactly. Another powerful strategy, Clear highlights, is habit tracking. There's something so satisfying about visually seeing your progress, whether it's on a calendar, an app, or even just a spreadsheet.
I find that super motivating too.
It's a reminder of your commitment and your progress. But a word of caution, Clear also emphasizes the importance of tracking meaningful progress, not just vanity metrics.
So it's not just about the number on the scale, it's about how you feel, your energy levels, your overall well-being.
Exactly. And of course, there's the flip side. Make it unsatisfying at a cost to those bad habits.
Ooh, I like this. So maybe something like paying a friend $5 every time you miss a workout, or having to do 10 push-ups every time you mindlessly scroll through social media.
Exactly. The idea is to make that bad habit less appealing with an immediate consequence. And don't forget, accountability can be powerful. Leverage that social pressure to help you stay on track.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from Clear's personal story and the power of tiny gains, to the importance of systems over goals and those identity-based habits.
And let's not forget those 4 laws of behavior change.
Right. We've laid a really solid foundation for understanding those core principles of Atomic Habits.
But now comes the exciting part, right?
Yeah.
Putting this knowledge into action.
Exactly. It's one thing to understand all the theory, but it's another to actually apply it in our lives.
So where do we start?
Well, Clear gives us this really handy tool called the Habit Scorecard. It's all about taking an honest look at your current habits, like what are you actually doing each day?
That sounds useful.
Yeah. You identify the cues that trigger those habits, and then think about the rewards you're getting from them.
So once you have a clearer picture of your habits, what then?
Then you can start to make more conscious choices about which ones you want to cultivate and which ones you're ready to ditch.
Okay, so it's about taking control instead of just letting those habits run on autopilot.
Exactly. Now, as we move into actually building better habits, I think it's a good time to circle back to that concept of identity-based habits. Remember, it's not just about the behavior itself, it's about becoming the kind of person who embodies that habit naturally.
So if you want to become a consistent writer, for example,
Yeah.
you don't just set a goal to write 500 words every day.
Right. It's about thinking about the identity of a writer. What does a writer do?
They observe, they reflect, they jot down ideas.
Exactly. They capture their thoughts. So even if you don't hit that word count goal every day, you're still reinforcing that identity by engaging in those smaller actions.
It's all about aligning your actions with that. Remember that 1% improvement each day. Those small victories add up.
Absolutely. Celebrate those small wins and let them fuel your motivation.
Another point Clear emphasizes is the importance of our environment.
Oh, yeah. Our surroundings can either support or sabotage our efforts.
Exactly. But here's the cool part. We can actually become architects of our environment. We can design it to work for us.
So, like making cues for good habits more obvious, a bowl of fruit on the counter, your workout clothes laid out by the door.
Exactly. Or making bad habits less convenient. Remove those tempting snacks from your pantry, or use those website blockers to minimize distractions.
And of course, we can use technology to our advantage, too.
Right. Automate those good habits. Think automatic savings deposits. Or use apps to make those bad habits harder, like limiting our screen time.
It's all about being mindful of how our environment influences us, and then making choices that align with our goals.
Absolutely.
I think what I love most about Atomic Habits is that it's ultimately a message of empowerment. It reminds us that we actually have the power to change our habits, and by doing so, to change our lives.
It's not about being perfect. It's about progress, about striving to be just a little bit better each day.
And as you continue on this journey, don't forget the importance of reflection and review.
Oh, that's a good point. Take the time to check in with yourself.
Regularly assess your progress. Are your habits still serving you? Are there any tweaks you need to make?
Remember, it's a lifelong process of growth and optimization.
Exactly. We've only scratched the surface of what Atomic Habits has to offer, so for those of you who want to dive deeper, we highly recommend picking up a copy.
There's so much valuable information in there.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, we'd love to leave you with a final thought. What's one small habit you can start working on today? What's one tiny step you can take towards becoming the person you want to be?
It can be something really simple just to get the ball rolling.
Remember, even the smallest actions can create ripples of change that extend far beyond ourselves. Thanks for joining us on this journey through Atomic Habits.